Welcome to this People and Purpose interview. My name is Esther Molnar-Mills, and it is my privilege today to introduce to you Jon Gordon, best-selling author and keynote speaker. Jon is a particularly inspiring consultant and speaker who works with a number of top-flight sports teams across the US, as well as Fortune 500 companies. Welcome, Jon.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be with you.
Thank you. So, Jon, can I ask you to tell us a little bit more about your background and your work?
Sure. Well, I never really expected to get into the work I do. I was really struggling with my life. I was actually in the .com world, technology and sales, and I was very negative and unhappy. And my wife came up to me and she said, where's the husband that I married? Where's the man that I knew years ago? And I knew I wanted to be a more positive person. I knew I wanted to be a better leader. I remember just saying, okay, why am I here? What am I born to do? And that's when writing and speaking just came to me. I never did it before, but it came to me like, okay, this is my purpose. This is what I'm here to do. I was like, okay, what am I going to write and speak about? And then positivity sort of became my thing. Again, I wanted to be more positive. So I believe we teach what we need to learn. And that has morphed into positive leadership, building positive cultures, being a more positive person, and making a positive difference. Whether it's a school where you have a leader of a school, you bring in a positive leader in that school, that leader will transform the school. You bring in a positive leader of a business, that leader who can execute with belief and with optimism, they can really create a brighter and better future. Sports teams, I work with great coaches and great teams, Major League Baseball and professional sports teams and you name it. These are great leaders who help their teams to believe that they can win. So positive leadership has really become my expertise, and also helping teams become more connected so that when they're connected, they're more committed. I've written about 13 books. I'm working on another one now. And I actually even have 2 children's books. One is called The Energy Bus for Kids, based on the adult Energy Bus version.
Which I would want to ask you about, actually, just in terms of how you translate some of these principles for children, because I think it's such an important life skill, in a sense,
Sure.
to be able to overcome things, to have grit, to have a growth mindset, even as a child. But before we talk about children, let me ask you a little bit about how you see leaders' world at the moment. So if I was to ask you, what are some of the key challenges as you see them, or as your clients tell you about, for leaders, whether they're leaders of top flight sports teams, or whether they're leaders in schools or in corporations? What do you see as some of the key challenges for leaders?
I think one of the key challenges is about building a great culture and then sticking with it. Mm-hmm. As you build a culture, everything in the world and everything even internally will almost try to sabotage your culture. So you have to continually focus on what matters most. You have to continually invest in what I call the root of the tree if you want the fruit. Mm-hmm. We live in a world that is so outcome focused, so numbers based, so win-loss, so stock price or standardized tests in schools, that this world can actually cause us to focus on the fruit of the tree and ignore the root. And as a leader, I think the hardest thing to do is to continually invest in that root, in the culture, in your people, in your purpose, and what you know matters most. And if you invest in that root, you get a great supply of fruit. So I see that as one of the biggest challenges. Another one is the negativity that everyone deals with. There's so much negativity in the world. There's negativity from competition. There's negativity even from world crisis that we're all facing. So as a leader, how do we stay optimistic and positive about our mission, about the work that we're doing, about the product or service that we're selling, in order to create more success? So that's a key part, is really helping your team stay positive. And I work a lot in that area because I have found that positive leaders are the ones who not only believe in a brighter and better future, but they're the ones who rally people, take action, and then execute in order to create it. So that's a big part of it. And then lastly, I don't think I know, we live in a world of busyness and stress. So the more busy and stressed we are, teams are becoming less and less connected. So one of the calls I get a lot from leaders are, how can I get my teams to be more connected? How can I get my organization more connected? And only through relationships do you create that connection. Relationships are the foundation upon which winning teams or companies are built. So it's about creating that connected team that is committed to each other, that then are able to better serve their clients or better serve the world ultimately.
Wow. So a tall order, really, in terms of those three areas that you mentioned around culture, positivity, and relationships in the teams. Are there any key strategies that you put forward for each of those, if we were to take them in turn? Culture, positive leadership, and connectedness and relationships. Are there any key strategies that you would want to share, or tips that you would want to invite leaders to follow?
Well, of course. I mean, these are what I write about. I mean, these are all in my books, and I'm much bigger on principles than strategies, because principles drive strategies. Principles drive ultimately truth of what we know to be true, and then that leads to a strategy. So for me, it's about the principle of creating a positive vision. For instance, when you're a leader, you have to know where you're going. You have to invite your team towards that vision. So it's about creating this positive vision of where you and your organization are going, and then inviting others on that journey with you to be part of that vision. It's about asking each member of your team, okay, here's our vision. What is your personal vision? And how does your vision contribute to our bigger vision? Like, how can you contribute to it on a daily basis? And then how can I help you achieve your vision to help us achieve our vision? And so it becomes a simple framework of creating this vision and then inviting that person to work towards it. And every day they do that, they're going to be more engaged at work. But then when they know that you're actually involved in helping them grow, helping them achieve the vision, now you get relationship coaching and you develop more of this connection as you work on it together. So in a nutshell, that really involves all the three things we talked about by that simple process.
And I really like that. And actually that chimes very nicely with something I've heard you speak about in terms of people wanting to follow leaders first and vision second. So while it's really important to set a clear vision, it is then about how the leaders build those relationships that then engage the team members to want to.
Very much so. You can have the greatest vision in the world, but you have to be someone that they want to follow. And a lot of times leaders will share the vision, but they don't invest the time to develop the relationship to achieve the vision together. Most change initiatives fail, not because of the change initiative, but because of the people that are leading the change. So at the managerial level, you have executive leaders saying, here's where we want to go. But at the management level, you don't have the managers who are able to drive the change. So we actually just created a program called Driver of Positive Change. And this is about helping managers become better leaders to then inspire and rally their teams to create success. And it's very relationship driven.
Interesting. Are you in a position to share with us some of the principles from that program in terms of if some of our listeners now think, actually, I am about to embark on a change program, or I'm the manager who is in charge of making sure that my particular team aligns itself well to a change program. What are some of the key things that need to be aware of?
Well, it's based on the Energy Busters program. So it's the rules of the bus. And the first one really is create that positive vision for the road ahead, which we just talked about. That's one of the key parts. Then it's about inviting people on that bus. You have to literally ask them to get on. Don't assume that they're on your bus just because they're working for you or in the same building. They may not be working for you or with you, even if they're sitting in the same room as you. You have to ask them to get on. You have to ask them to join you in this initiative, in this vision, to build something great together. So that's a big part of it, is to invite them on that bus. Then it's about, again, the relationships we just talked about. I wrote about this in The Carpenter. It's about loving, serving, and caring. So developing a relationship with the people you work with, finding out what their strengths are, coaching them and mentoring them to develop those strengths, helping them help you achieve this initiative, making time for for weekly meetings, developing that connection, more one-on-one conversations, better communication, because where there's avoiding communication, negativity fills it. So as a big part of this change initiative strategy, you want to make sure that you're always driving change with great communication, even over communication. Even if the news isn't good, you want to make sure you're communicating, because you want people to know what's going on. You want them to understand what's going on. And when they do, they'll be more positive as they approach it. Uncertainty breeds fear. So it's important to remember that when you're uncertain, fear is going to be a part of that. And you don't want an organization that's filled with fear. You want an organization that is filled with faith in a brighter and better future.
Absolutely, which then brings us back around to this notion of positivity and seeing what's working and gratitude, really, which is one of the key principles of this, isn't it?
Yes, very much so.
Fantastic. Okay, I do actually want to ask you a little bit about the positive dog book, if I may, just in terms of translating this into practice for managers and leaders. And one of the things that struck me about that piece was when you were talking about the idea of teams feeding the positive dog together. Now, for people who might not have read the book, can you just tell us just a couple of sentences about it, and then share your thoughts about how teams can work together and how leaders can marshal teams to be more positive together?
Sure. Well, I wrote a book called The Energy Bus. And in The Energy Bus, I talked about the two dogs, that the man who's struggling, and he goes to the wise man in the village. And he says to the wise man, I feel like there are two dogs inside of me. One dog is this positive, kind, and generous dog. And I have this mean-spirited, angry, negative dog, and they fight all the time. I don't know who's going to win. And the wise man thinks for a moment and says, I know who's going to win, the one you feed the most. So feed the positive dog. And every day we have that choice to feed the positive or the negative dog inside of us. And whichever one we feed, that's what grows. And the same thing with others. We can feed the positive in others, or we can feed the negative in others. So then I took that analogy further and wrote a little book called The Positive Dog. And it's literally about a negative dog in a shelter and a big dog named Bubba, who takes this negative dog, Matt, who they call Mutt, and they take him under his paw, and he teaches him the science and the benefits and the strategies of being positive. And then together they seek to transform the shelter. So it's this, again, it's this analogy, it's metaphor for what we experience in business and in life, where as a leader, you're going to deal with negativity, but leadership is a transfer of belief. And if you don't have it, you can't share it. So the research is very clear that optimistic leaders outperform pessimistic leaders. Optimistic salespeople outperform pessimistic salespeople. We know that positive companies and positive teams outperform negative companies and teams. We know that research from Duke University shows that positive people work harder, they get paid more, they live longer, they're more likely to win in sports and in politics as well. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in our political election. But it doesn't happen all the time, right? But the research, generally predicts it and shows that. So we have all this great research that, again, positive leadership, positive teams, positive organizations matter. They make a difference, but it doesn't happen by accident. You have to make sure that you feed the positive on a daily basis. That leadership is a transfer of belief. And if you don't have it, you can't share it. So it's about making sure that you're sharing it with your team, feeding them, feeding yourself, and then together you're able to grow your organization with that belief, with that optimism. A great story is, William Bratton. William Bratton was the police chief under Rudy Giuliani. And years ago, New York suffered a lot of crime issues. No one thought they could reduce the crime. William Bratton was charged with doing that, with leading the way. And so he was asked how he did it, because he successfully reduced crime. And years later, he was asked how he did it. He said, well, I brought in the 5 bureau chiefs of the New York area, and I asked them one simple question, one by one in meetings. I said, do you believe that crime can be reduced in your area? Well, 3 people said, no, it can't be reduced. 2 said yes. He said, unfortunately, I had to fire 3 people that day because they didn't believe that crime could be reduced. Why would I want anyone leading the way in charge of reducing crime who didn't believe it could be reduced? He replaced them with optimists. He replace them with people who believe that they can make a difference, and together they did. It shows the importance of positive leadership when really trying to create anything. We also know Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was famous for what they called his reality distortion field. Time and time again, Steve's employees said it would take a long time to create a software product or something to do with the hardware. And he would say, no, you're going to get it done in half that time. And time again, they would say it couldn't be done, but he would convince them that they could do it. They said he had this ability to distort their reality from pessimism, or some would say realism, like I'm just being a realist, to optimism. And time again, they actually accomplished the very thing that they thought was impossible. So they did it. Why? Because he transferred his belief to them. He distorted their reality, which is what positive leaders often do.
And it's a really good set of examples for this. We often think that happiness will follow once we have certain things, once we have a certain amount of success, once we have a certain amount of material possessions, once we win stuff, we will then be happy. But actually, as you see, what the research suggests, that it moves the other way, that people who are already happy, who are engaged, who are seeing the purpose in what they're doing, are then the people who create those results for themselves and their organizations.
Yeah, but if you want to have a life that is exciting, then get excited about life. It starts with who we are on the inside. You have to experience it on the inside if you want to experience it on the outside. I think of Winston Churchill. I was just reading about him last night, and you look at a leader who just had this optimism, this belief, and was able to rally a nation together. And that is the power of a positive leader. But it's not just for leaders like that. It's for everyday leaders. It's for small businesses. It's for school principals. It's for bus drivers. And it's also for parents, that we can better lead our teams in a positive direction when we stay positive.
And that brings us beautifully to, I do want to ask you about your children's book. Tell me a little bit about what made you feel that these principles were worth or were important to share with children as well.
Well, with the Energy Bus, we kept on getting asked to write a children's book based on the Energy Bus. So it was really people asking for it that drove me to write it. And I'm glad I did, because I've found that children really do embrace the principles of being positive, of dealing with the negativity they face. We call it bullies in the children's book, and how they have to deal with bullies and overcome the bullying they face, which is very common in the United States. I also, wanted children to understand that they can enjoy the ride and love their passengers. So these principles that adults should live by are the same principles that help children thrive as well. So it made a lot of sense. And judging from the response and from parents and teachers reading the books in the classrooms, it really does resonate with them. And then I wrote a book called Thank You and Good Night, which was a book that hit me as I was walking on the beach one day. I literally wrote this book on a napkin in about 45 minutes. And it was all about just gratitude. It was about children experiencing and saying the things that they're thankful for. So thank you for this day. Thank you for this night. Thank you for the sun that shines so bright. Thank you for butterflies and ladybugs. Thank you for grandmas and grandpas who give great big hugs. So it's this long rhyme of gratitude in this book. It's sort of like Good Night Moon, but based on gratitude. And again, I wanted to have parents and children be able to go to bed at night thinking about the things that they were thankful for, instead of all the things that, went wrong that day.
And if we see that sense of positivity as a practice, as a craft, then it makes perfect sense to want to start that early, so that children can make that part of just their normal way of life or their practice, so that by the time they become the next leaders, they really have this skill and that habit down to pat. Just as we're about to wrap up, any sort of last messages or a core sort of principle that you might want to share?
Sure. Well, a few things. We don't get burned out because of what we do. We get burned out because we forget why we do it. So it's so important to know what your purpose is as a leader or in everyday life. Like, why do you do what you do? Why are you here? And when you know your purpose, when you know your why, you know the way. So purpose will fuel you up for an amazing journey through life when you live with that purpose. So that's really important. I also think it's important not to chase success. We live in a world where people want the success. They want the money. They want the fame. But don't chase success. Decide to make a difference and success will find you. So when you look for ways to make a difference, to solve problems, to help others, to make the world a better place, you'll find solutions to problems. And that's what great businesses do. That's what great organizations do. They find solutions to problems. If I was starting a new company, I would say, okay, what are some of the problems and how can I solve that? And that's how every great business is born. So look for those opportunities to make a difference. And then lastly, don't seek happiness. You said it earlier. I mean, we live in a world that is looking for ways to be happy. There's more books on happiness than ever, but it's not about seeking happiness. It's about living and working with passion and purpose. And if you bring passion and purpose to life, if you love what you do, then happiness is going to be a byproduct of that. If you love others, happiness will be a byproduct of that. It's not about trying to be happy. It's about making a difference, living and work with passion and purpose, and then happiness will flow from that state.
Beautiful last words. Thank you very much, Jon.
Thank you so much.